Hi, this is Matt with State of Flux here with a review for Star Trek Picard, the complete series. But before I get into that review, I'd like to take a minute to talk to you about something that one of my friends is trying to get up and off the ground. She has started her own publishing company called Wandering Witch Publishing. This is a place that is planning to specialize in publications of poetry, short stories, and novels, amongst other things. Wandering Witch describes itself as a space for growth where imaginative thinkers come together and challenge perspectives by engaging in counterculture through magical realism and real magicalism. This is a really fun publishing company, and it offers a lot of really neat ideas of what can be, but she needs your help to try to get this off the ground. So if you have any moment, I'm going to be dropping in my towel section down below a link for both her website and her GoFundMe, where she's trying to raise money to get this upstart up and started. So if you get a chance, please take a look at that. But moving on to Star Trek Picard. Star Trek Picard is something of anomaly for me. It is Star Trek at both the best that Star Trek could ever possibly be, and also Star Trek at kind of the worst that it ever has been. And what rattled my brain was how it just kind of was jerking me around between the seasons. I did not start watching it until there was only 2 episodes left to air. But once I started the show, I couldn't help but just speed run through it. And a lot of that has to do with Season 1. Season 1 is a very good season. I know that it has its haters, and I kind of get it. It doesn't necessarily feel Star Trek. It feels like Star Trek by way of Firefly, in that you have your sort of wizened moral compass character who is kind of there to guide the others on the ship, that's captained by a sort of space pirate character in Rios, who is brought onto this whole thing through his a kind of warrior woman character that is sort of his buddy in all of this. That's your Raffi character. Also on board the ship is, and what's driving the show, is the girl with the fragile mind who doesn't know who she is or what she belongs to, and if she's a monster or if she's just human. Well, also being cared for by a doctor who at any moment looks like they could go sinister, but has a true heart to them in the character of Jurati. That sounds an awful lot like Firefly. I'm a big fan of Firefly, so I dug it right off the bat, and it felt like a weirdly logical next step to the end of the Star Trek stories that I had been watching. I dabbled in Discovery and didn't dig it, so I hopped off that train pretty fast. And so truthfully, my last exposure to Star Trek is the 3 J.J. Abrams movies, and this kind of feels like in tone with those movies were, well, kind of going into new area that actually has brimming ideas. This show does, and Season 1 is very good. And I liked how it tied not only into the Abrams story, the whole mission with Mars and stuff like that, and the Romulans is what kickstarted Spock to get thrust into the Calvin timeline. So not only does it acknowledge the Abrams movies, but it is a continuation, and a rather strong one, of the latter Star Trek Next Gen movies, which I have mixed feelings on. There's great elements in those last 2 movies, but there's also stuff that just doesn't really work. This weirdly elevates what was good there and makes those movies stronger and uses those as like a support system for a really strong run of a first season. The characters are what really sold me though. I liked these characters. Rios and Soji are two of the best characters in all of Star Trek, in my opinion. I loved them, and I would die to watch more Rios. We'll talk about him more in a little bit. Soji was fantastic, and the actress playing her was able to play her and her sister and various other characters throughout. Every bit as well as Brent Spiner plays Data and Lore and his variants. She is great, and if she is Data's daughter, she was the perfect casting choice. She was phenomenal. Big fan of her. Season 1, on the whole, is really good. The highlight episode, and this could be because it brought back my favorite main character of the Next Generation, is the Nepenthe episode, where it brought back Riker and Troi. But then you find out they had both a son and a daughter. The son has passed away. The daughter is played by Lulu Wilson, who is a gifted young actress. I'm a big fan of her, and she stole my heart in that episode. I absolutely loved her character. Want to see more of her. Unfortunately, we never do throughout the course of the series. But you know what? Star Trek is still moving forward, and maybe she will show back up. Again, gifted actress, interesting character, but that episode was such a darn good highlight. And the final episode of Season 1 is an emotional, heartfelt conclusion that felt like it could just be the end of both Picard and the whole Next Gen storyline. I had a conclusive ending that I was happy with and I loved. And then Season 2 happened to me, rather forcibly, and I hated it. Outside of being bookended by two relatively okay to good episodes, Season 2 is a movie where you just can't not watch the train wreck as it's happening, because you can't believe how something could go so fiercely off the rails. First of all, they basically just get rid of the Soji character, who is my second favorite character of the series. And I don't really know why. Like, she shows up in like 3 or 4 episodes, but hardly, and her use in those episodes is pretty poor. So I actually kind of wish they just didn't bring her back, because I'd rather not have her than have a bastardized version of her. But this whole season is kind of doing the whole mirror mirror thing for a whole season, where we are thrust into an alternate timeline, a possible past. It's really confusing, and it doesn't even follow its own logic, because they say that this is stuff that's really happening, but it also is clearly designed to be a separate timeline. But it can't be a separate timeline because it has the guy from the music guy from Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, and that means that it actually all did happen. But if it did happen, then how come characters know each other but don't know each other? And it is just a confusing mess. And I want to go back for a second to that Star Trek IV little cameo bit. You get Picard on the bus. I don't think it's Picard, I think it's 7 of 9. And Raffi on the bus with the same guy that Spock does the nerve pinch to, that's listening to the punk rock music, and he has a cameo again, and that's the problem with the season. This seems like forceful fan service, whereas the first season had elements that built the story that you could connect back to old things. They never outright state that that mission to Mars with the Romulans thing is the exact same catalyst for bringing Spock into the JJ world. If you're a fan of the Star Trek medium, you will know that and pick up on that. And that's a cool Easter egg for you. But it's not something that's jammed down your throat. And same thing with like various references to Star Trek 9 and 10. Insurrection and Nemesis. those were used as like pillars of a story that already exists. This is just jamming things down your throat, and you're supposed to acknowledge it because you're a Star Trek fan. And it does not work. A good example of this is in the very first episode of Season 2, when everything changes suddenly and you're thrust into the mirror world, all because of Q. John Delancey has this little line where he's like, "That was yesterday's Enterprise, Picard." And you're just like, oh, like the very famous episode. I get it. And you want to die inside, because that's the level of writing that you're getting. And there was a great moment in Season 2 where I was watching the show, and my wife came down the stairs and sat down next to me as I was watching the show, and she said, "I thought you were watching Star Trek." To which I said, "So did I." It's terrible. It has this whole Borg subplot that is confusing as all hell, villainizes one of the characters for no reason other than to just do it, and they didn't really know what to do with her character. Which is weird, because her character did have a journey that you could have taken her on. She committed murder in the previous season, and they don't really acknowledge it. They acknowledge it a little bit, but they don't ever let her deal with that. You could have done a whole season of her dealing with that, rather than make her one with the Borg, and that was just mind-numbing. Not least of which is, like, didn't Borg Queen die? I haven't watched all of Voyager. I've seen episodes here and there, and I'm to understand that there is a Borg Queen episode there, but I don't know. That whole Borg Queen thing, and then what ultimately happens with it, is just convoluted mess. Not a fan. Not to mention, we're going to talk about why Season 2 works, if at all, is there are scenes that are fantastic in a bubble, because Patrick Stewart and John Delancey are fantastic actors, as is Jerry Ryan, as is all of the cast members who bring this up to keep you watching. I was able to sustain through, even though I didn't like any of the storytelling, because I liked the character of Rios, and I wanted to see what he did with that little family of physicians. Hated ultimately how that resolved itself. But Season 2 should have been my favorite thing in the world. It brought back Guinan, who's actually my favorite character in all of the Next Generation stuff. And Whoopi Goldberg comes back, and she's lovely. She is so good in her 2 episodes. Then we're given a Guinan that's young Guinan, who's not convincing at playing the same character. It's almost impossible to believe that they're the same person. And then, I don't know, like, the quality of performers and the fact that you like some of these characters can sustain you through the season, but the moment it ends, you're like, this is not good. Yet you're blinded by the fact that the scenes with Q and Picard, both in that first episode and the last episode of the season, are so emotionally palpable, and they work for you on that level that you're kind of tricked into thinking maybe you watched something good, but once you apply any thought to it, it all crumbles. And I gotta say, had I not been told Season 3 was very good, I probably would have hopped off. Especially because of that Wesley Crusher scene. In the last episode of Season 2, Wesley Crusher shows back up, picking up a story thread that was in, like, one of the latter seasons of The Next Generation, where he's, like, one of the Time Masters, and Will Wheaton gives a baffling performance, because he's smiling at you the whole time, as if he's been possessed by the creature monster thing from Smile, and it's unsettling, unnerving, and the scene is baffling, and also goes to write out my second favorite character. So Season 2 did nothing to accomplish moving anything forward. The story begins and ends essentially in the exact same spot, except now they've written out both Rios and Soji, who were my two favorite characters of Picard. I almost died. I almost hopped off and was like, no more. Luckily, I stayed on board for Season 3, which functions almost as a fifth movie of the Next Generation crew. It reunites the entire gang one last time, but does it in organic storytelling over 10 episodes that is so well constructed and so well written and so well acted that you cannot stop watching it. It was fascinating because I was so elated with that first season of Picard that I felt sated by the end of it, that I didn't necessarily need any more. But it was so good, I was like, oh, there's a season 2, let's watch it. However, the ending of season 1, I felt complete. I didn't need to continue the journey anymore. What season 3 does is build upon that. It entirely ignores, outside of like 1 or 2 lines, all of season 2. So if you don't want to watch season 2, or if you've never been exposed to it, just don't. It's terrible. But season 3 builds off of story threads from season 1, and then picks up all these loose story threads left over from the TV show and the movie of the Next Generation crew, and reunites the whole gang organically. And it leaves you wanting more. Even by the end of it, I feel complete with those stories, but I cannot wait to see what the future holds beyond it. And what they did with some of the characters. So many characters have great story arcs throughout the entire season 3. Picard, Gates McFadden as Beverly Crusher nails it. This is the best use of her character ever, period. Like, full stop. Riker is at his absolute best, and that's saying something. He directs the best episode of season 3, which is called No Win Scenario. I cried twice during that episode, and it is full of emotion. But as emotional of a journey as season 3 is, it also has a levity to it. It feels like true Star Trek, and it's filled with ideas that get you thinking. And it has a villain that is complex and interesting in the Changeling. And I loved it. The last 2 episodes, while also being fantastic, kind of deviate everything that happened in the first 8 episodes in a weird way, but it works enough, and they were able to make a story and sell me an ending that did feel emotionally resonant and right, and so I'm on board with them. However, I don't necessarily think those last 2 episodes are quite as good as everything that leads up to it, particularly that no-win scenario episode. But the last 2 episodes, I'm not gonna lie, had me cheering. Absolutely cheering while I was watching it. Had me crying, and made me... The season ended so good, and the series ended so good. As I said, there's teasing of what the next Enterprise could someday be, and we're given the captain of that in the final episode, who has such a great character journey through really all 3 seasons of the show, but particularly in that last season. Oh, fantastic. But watching this inspired me to just go back and rekindle all of my love of all eras of Star Trek. So this is something that I had talked about doing last year, and I even started it. I did a Season 1 original series review, and then I reviewed my favorite episode of Season 1. This is sort of my pledge to you. I'm going to keep that up, and I'm going to review episodes here and there, but also full seasons of all the Enterprise mainline stories that will take you all the way through to Picard. So I'll deep dive into seasons 1, 2, and 3 of Picard at some point, maybe even later this year, but it could spill over into next year depending on time and whatnot. But that's basically all I wanted to say. Picard was so good by the end of it that it rekindled my love with Star Trek in a way that I have not experienced since I first discovered it back in high school. So that's high praise. Season 3 of Star Trek is probably the best individual season of any Star Trek show. And it could be because of linear storytelling. Back in the day, you got like Creature of the Week episodes basically every week, because that was the format of television. It was reset television. We're not in that era anymore. And in telling a singular story over the 8 to 10 episodes, they masterfully did so in such a beautiful way, and I urge you to watch Star Trek Picard and look forward to my videos. I'll be reposting some of my old ones, and if I don't really like, I'm going to rewatch those old reviews. If I'm not really on board with how I presented my reviews for those ones, I might come at you again with a little more truncated version of it. But anyway, that's my complete series review for Star Trek Picard. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below. Who was your favorite character? By the end of the series, my favorite character was 7 of 9. Jerry Ryan was a beast and a brilliant performance. Jerry Ryan, all the way. She is so fantastic. But a lot of love out there for Rios and Soji. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Peace.